Welcome to the basement of science. My name is Beckett.
And I'm Biles.
And today we're going to be talking about brain and behavior. So social scientists, social psychologists have come up with some really interesting studies which have basically proven that humans are not nearly as perceptive as we think we are. One of my favorite of the phenomena that they've discovered is something called change blindness. The basic idea is that you're looking at a visual scene and something happens. So for example, a car could drive by in front of you. You could just blink for a second, or somebody could get in your face and bother you for a second. In that brief instant where you're not able to see the scene in front of you, something relatively insignificant or very significant could change and you wouldn't even notice. So, for example, let's take a look at this picture. Take a look at it for a second. I'm now going to close the notebook. So when we open it back up, I've made several changes in this picture. But because there was a brief interlude where you weren't able to see it, you may not notice what those changes were. So this is the basic phenomena of change blindness. Basic idea being, you look at something, there's a moment where you're not looking at it, you look back, and maybe now you don't see the changes are. Now, social psychologists have discovered this phenomena over and over and over again, looking at pictures, but also in social interactions. But they're not only interested that this happens, they're also interested in why it happens and what's actually happening in the brain. So for that, we need to go back to Mr. Biles to discuss the science behind the magic.
All right, guys. So there's tons of interesting stuff going on in the brain all the time, right? So there's a specific part of your brain called the visual cortex, and that's the part of your brain that processes visual information. And so when you see something, your visual cortex picks that up, processes it, and then sends it to different parts of your brain to be used accordingly. But when your visual cortex has an overload of information, it starts to prioritize what it processes. So for example, say you're walking down the street and there's a helicopter that lands in front of you. Pretty big deal, right? So your brain is going to prioritize looking at this helicopter, and it's going to miss out on the fact that this dog is chasing a squirrel over to your left. You're not going to notice that, even though it may, in normal circumstances, may be a big deal. So the visual cortex can get overloaded, and the brain starts to prioritize what's actually important in regards to what you're seeing.
So just like you, your brain has to make priorities. When they prioritize certain things like we all know happens, get left out. So this phenomenon of change blindness is something you might be a little bit suspicious of. So what we ask you to do is pause this video and try to figure out what are the changes that we've made in this scene just between you guys and us since the beginning of the video. So pause this video, go back to the beginning, try to find as many changes as you can, and then come back to this point right here. So what you guys might have noticed is there's been a couple changes made. One is that some of the things on the table have changed. I've also changed my shirt color. I was wearing this gray shirt over here, and I've changed my hat. I was wearing this hat before. But most significantly, some of you may have noticed that Mr. Biles in the beginning was actually Peter Biles, Mr. Biles' younger brother, who's 6 years younger. So that's just one example of change blindness. So we encourage you guys, if you guys are interested in this, check out this book by two psychologists. It's called The Invisible Gorilla, and it will tell you more than you want to know, and it will also tell you more about how we are constantly missing out on things that we think we're perceiving. So that's, I'm Beckett.
I'm Biles.
And this is the Basement of Science, and we'll catch you next time.
Peace.